Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you for joining us for this Steinway Sons online webinar, an exclusive Q&A with Steinway Sons President and CEO Ron Losby. This webinar is part of the Steinway Teachers Educational Program, also known as STEP. If you're a music educator and would like to find out more about STEP, please visit steinway.com/education/STEP. Our guest today is the CEO of Steinway Musical Instruments and my boss's boss, Ron Losby. Mr. Losby was named as Chief Executive Officer of Steinway Musical Instruments in 2016. Prior to this role, Mr. Losby has served as President of Steinway Sons for the Americas since 2008, based at the New York factory. Hi, Ron.
Hey, hello, Ben. How are you?
I'm great. Ron, I think the best place to start is with the Steinway origin story. Maybe you could start around, say, 1853.
Well, you know, the Steinway saga, as I like to say it, is really just an incredible story of reaching and obtaining the American dream that turned into the world dream. You know, Heinrich Steinweg was a cabinet maker in Ziesen, Germany. And much to his wife's chagrin, he built his first piano in 1836 in their kitchen. But he always had a dream to go to the New World. And at that time, we had lots of cowboys and Indians, and culture was not what it was in Europe. And he thought, if I can go over there and build pianos, because it was like the computer industry and the software industry is today, it was like everybody was building pianos. They were getting them into houses everywhere. And so if I can go over there and build a better piano, I'm going to have a much better life for myself, my wife, and my sons. So in the late 1840s, he and three of his sons and his wife, of course, moved to New York City, and they went to work for other piano companies that were already in existence here. And that lasted about 3 or 4 years. And on March 5th, 1853, right here in Manhattan, they opened up Steinway Sons. And what was so interesting and really forward thinking at that time is they had the manufacturing facility in the back, very small. And in the front was what they called their wear rooms, where they showed the pianos. And because everybody was building and selling pianos, it was highly competitive. And it was interesting because they had the women, the Steinway women, the wives of the Steinway guys, they were the sales assistants and the teachers, which was unusual at that time, while the guys in the back were actually handcrafting the pianos. And Doretta Steinway, one of the Steinway daughters, said, you know, I need to be something better than my competitor. And she was a piano teacher. And she says, what if I include lessons with every sale of the piano? And she did, and they started selling more pianos just because she was providing education and also providing a better piano than the competitor.
What was your first memory, Ron, of playing on a Steinway? And also, what do you remember about your first day working at the company?
Oh, my first memory of playing a Steinway was in my home when I was, I don't remember, 4 or 5 years old. And I just remember always wanting to play on those keys, and finally got piano lessons with a teacher that really shaped my life to where I am today. But she had a Steinway as well, but hers sounded so much better than ours. And I remember asking my mom, I said, why? How come hers sounds so much better? And so the teacher came over and says, well, you do need to tune it occasionally. So I guess we hadn't tuned our piano in quite some time. But my first day at Steinway, I mean, I had already owned a Steinway. In fact, I had owned 2 Steinways at that point. I worked for another piano company, to remain nameless right now. And I came to the Steinway factory, and I remember walking through the Steinway factory and smelling that wood and seeing how these incredible individual instruments come to life. And as a pianist who wanted to be the next Rubinstein or Horowitz, I spent hours and hours and hours at the keyboard, but I never really knew what happened in the back. When I hit a key, how did that make noise? You know, I didn't understand all that. And when I saw how complex and how painstaking and how miraculous that this instrument comes together, I just remember my first day just being absolutely overwhelmed with emotion, frankly, on how this instrument touches me and many, many others.
Can you maybe take us through that process of building a Steinway? Heinrich Steinweg changed his name to Henry Steinway, opened the New York factory, and then when demand grew He went back to Hamburg and opened a second factory. So I don't know if people know that there are two factories, but that, the New York factory was the first one. And what it's really like to watch a Steinway go from wood to the instrument that we know and love.
Well, from that first factory on Varick Street, which today we wouldn't even call it a factory, frankly, because it was so small. They moved to Park Avenue because they became much more successful, built a lot more pianos, and they won first prize in the Paris exposition, which for an American company to win first prize in pianos for all these venerable European masters that had been around for years was really quite, they called it the Great Piano Wars is what they called it, because no one could believe that this young upstart company that had been in business for about 10, 12 years could actually win first prize. But their notoriety, because of William Steinway, Heinrich's son, the marketing genius that he was, he did something that we do today in a very different way. But he started our concert and artist program, and he thought, with all these homes across America, if I can bring the superstar of Europe over there, and if he plays my piano, it's going to build demand for the Steinway piano. So he got none other than Anton Rubinstein, who at the time was really a character, a character, a Superman written by Byron. He was a Byronic Superman, like a rock star, like, I don't know, Justin Bieber or somebody today that everybody knows his name. And he brought him over. He liked the Steinway piano, and he said, I will not play it unless I find it to be the best, because my music comes first. Fortunately, he found it to be the best, and he played that piano from coast to coast. And then William Steinway said, we should do this with more artists. And so many years later, Paderewski came through, and every artist of any repute would come and play on the Steinway piano, and it built demand. And that is one of the distinguishing factors of the Steinway company's history compared to other piano companies' histories.
And was that the beginning of the Steinway Artists Program as we know it today?
It was the beginning as we know it today. And my understanding is that it is the longest continuously implemented American business and marketing program that has ever existed. And we still covet this program because these artists are so precious to us. And the reason the Steinway piano has become better and better and better is we solicit their feedback all the time and say, how can we make this better? How can, Long comes in and says, I want it to repeat faster. If Claudio Rao would come in and say, we need a bigger bass, or whatever their preference was, we would do whatever we could to please our artists that play our piano. And the very interesting thing now, we have 2,000 artists, and we just love them all, but we don't pay them to play the Steinway piano. And that, for me, is just an extraordinary accomplishment of this instrument that they freely choose to play because they find it to be the best.
For you, Ron, as a pianist, who was your most influential pianist when you were growing up and playing?
Well, I find it interesting that I wanted to be just like a 5-foot portly man by the name of Arthur Rubinstein. And he was my role model. He was, to this day, I think he was one of the greatest pianists that ever lived. And he inspired me so much that it turned me into a much better pianist by listening to what he was able to do on the piano. And I was so fortunate to meet him on several occasions when I was young. And he was just an extraordinary person as well as an extraordinary musician and pianist.
Recent Steinway & Sons New York models are becoming more similar to their Hamburg counterparts. Is that the plan? Is that by design?
Well, it is. And the important thing to note is that we build the same piano, but it sounds and feels different. Touch and tone are always going to be different because artists want different things. So in essence, we build two different pianos on the inside. Now, the case architecture has changed, and it is changed for a very good reason because we can't ramp up production quickly. And if there is great demand in Europe or great demand in the United States, we could use cases from both parts of the world. So it gives us more manufacturing flexibility, in case we need to avail ourselves of that. But touch and tone, there is a New York sound and there is a Hamburg sound. And really, it's remarkable because so many artists that play solo recitals today, I've seen on many occasions, they use two different pianos for two different halves. If they're playing, Schubert and Mozart and some sort of a classic repertoire, many times they'll choose the Hamburg instrument. If they're playing Brahms and Rachmaninoff and something big, they'll choose the New York. But it's all about personal preference and all about what one likes. I like a New York piano because I grew up with it.
Sure.
And people in Europe and in some parts of Asia like the German piano because they grew up with it and got used to it. But the case architecture has been unified to a certain degree, but the touch and tone will always remain separate.
Well, let's stay with that for a second. If you could try to quantify or qualify the touch and tone difference, how would you articulate that?
Well, it's very subjective, and whatever I say, somebody is going to disagree with me. But from my opinion, the German sound, and when I lived in London and in Germany, I had a Hamburg Steinway in my home, which I loved very much. It's a very clean, very pure, and I would say that when you hit the note, you hear the fundamental as opposed to the overtones, much more so than you do in a New York piano. Many times a European artist will come and they'll play a New York piano and they'll say, well, it sounds muddy. It sounds, sort of clouded. And that's because the fundamental is less, but the envelope of the sound is much more colorful. It has more overtones. And that is because of the way it's voiced, meaning how thick and how hard the hammer felt is, that gives it that different sort of resonance, if you will. But it's very subjective. I've been in way too many conversations and been the referee for many where I'll have two great pianists and they're both espousing the virtues of different pianos. And I just sit back and smile and say, isn't it great that they both say Steinway?
Another question from one of our participants. In terms of style, personality, and artistic value, how does Mr. Losby advise teachers to recommend certain Steinway models to students?
It's a very good question. And I think, in my view, buying the biggest Steinway you can afford or you can have room for is the best thing that you should do, because it is something that you're going to have for a very long period of time in your life, basically. You're not going to buy another one, most likely. But obviously, size and budget does matter. Every Steinway is made the same way. Some are just a little shorter or a little longer than others. So I would think it really has more to do with the size of the room that it's going into initially, and also if there's any budget constraints that a customer has to deal with. But they're all beautiful pianos, but buy the biggest one that you can because you're going to have it for your entire life.
It's absolutely true. I can say, just like the housing market, when they say buy as much house as you can afford, at Steinway, we'd say the same thing: buy as much piano as you can afford. But a corollary, when you have a big house, your kids may leave, but the Steinway you're going to have forever. Very true. A corollary to that question: what are the best piano rental options for music teachers whose principal instrument is not the piano?
Well, we're distributed by dealers and we have company-owned retail stores, and they have great rental opportunities in their showrooms. And I just encourage that if it's not a piano is not the main interest, you just need one for accompaniment purposes. There's many long-term rental options that are available. And frankly, you need to compare that to if you're teaching in your home or in your studio with the purchase option, because even a Steinway or a Boston or an Essex piano, which we produce under license, they're all wonderful pianos. They will last nearly a lifetime. And it might be a better option for one to consider purchasing it maybe on a finance program, which is what I did with my piano.
Staying with manufacturing process for a moment, Mark asks, where does the Steinway wood come from? Sorry, where does the soundboard wood come from for the Hamburg pianos?
The soundboard wood comes from, in Hamburg right now, we get some from the United States, or Alaska, I should say, from Sitka, Alaska, and there's some that is sourced from Northern Europe as well. It's not so much important where the wood comes from, but if it has the requisite color the requisite thickness and the number of grain lines per inch, which is a very important specification for both New York and German pianos. The soundboard is like the case of a Stradivarius violin. And if you don't have the finest quality available that's going to vibrate just hopefully forever, they never do, but vibrate, you know, when you hit the note, then it's not going to produce that Steinway sound. So the soundboard material is very important.
So I know for North America, that's the north-facing Sitka spruce, right? I remember reading that a few hundred times, I think.
Yes,
okay. A piano teacher asks, how might teachers benefit from the Steinway Sons Spirio and Spirio R? Which, to be clear, she's referring to the world's finest high-resolution player piano, which is the latest model from Steinway Sons.
You know, there are so many ways that this can affect education and teaching that I don't think we have enough time for me to say all of them. So I'll give you the top two. First of all, on a fundamental basis, having a Spirio piano with this incredible library of the world's finest artists playing all these wonderful repertoire, to be able to listen to that, and perhaps you're studying the same work and listen to how Rubinstein or Long or whoever it might be is playing that, can be very instructive. But on the Spirio R, what I find so remarkably exciting about this is being able to record your performance and listen to it when you're not playing it, because you get a very different perspective when you're not playing. And imagine at your senior recitals or your recital in the store that you're able to record your program or your pieces and then sit in the back room, the back row of the auditorium, and listen to yourself play. How informative, how instructive that would be. Because I know so many times I've been at a lesson with a teacher, and they'd say, oh, you're rushing, your dynamics, your crescendo's not big enough, your diminuendo's not small enough, you know, the rhythm is not right, the tempo is not right. And I would say, I think it is. I think she's nuts. You know, I mean, I just didn't believe, I thought I was doing something. When I record myself and listen to it, then it's really quite obvious that you're actually doing something that you're not supposed to. So it really becomes informative.
Yeah, my experience with the Spirio, just as you said, as pianists, we're used to sitting on that bench and only hearing ourselves from 3 inches away from the instrument. Whereas just the ability to literally step back from our performance is an amazing tool.
It gives you a perspective that has never, ever been available before. You could only record on a device of some sort and listen to it through a speaker, and it's not anywhere close to what comes out of a real piano. So from an educational standpoint, it just is, I think, a huge breakthrough for the learning of the piano.
What's the difference in sound between old Steinways and new Steinways?
Well, there is quite a bit of difference. I mean, when you look at the Steinways that are, you know, older, they were the best pianos at their given time. So a piano from 1950 was the best Steinway that had ever been built, from 1970, 2020, etc. It's interesting when you think about the piano as being an evolutionary instrument. It is constantly evolving. And once again, that goes back to the artist input. And we're constantly trying to improve it, to make it better. And although it may not look that much different than a piano we made 30 years ago, 40 years ago, on the inside, the piano is different. And it's different because the artist wanted it to perform better than it did in the past. And if I were to list all of the differences, I mean, from the cast iron plate to the way we put the soundboard in, to the way the type of strings that we use, the glue technology. I mean, years ago, we used to use animal hide glues. Now we use these space age glues, so everything is set for life. And the felt that we use is very different. And an older Steinway, I mean, Steinways last a very long period of time, but one thing that's very interesting is we have hundreds of pianos that are stationed for artist use around the world. They pay a fee and they get to take it to Carnegie Hall or wherever they're performing. They always want the newest Steinways because they perform the best. If these artists, all 2,000 of them, wanted old Steinways, I guarantee you we'd have old Steinways in the Steinway Piano Bank because they're so important to us. But they always want to have the newest, the latest, the best, because they know that it actually will perform better than the one that they had 10 years ago.
Um, Wendy asks, what is the difference between Boston pianos and Steinway pianos? So perhaps this is an opportunity to talk about the Steinway family of pianos with Steinway Boston and Essex.
Great, yes. The family of Steinway designed pianos has one very important thing in common. They're all designed by Steinway. Steinway has 167 years of piano design experience. And when you're building any product, but particularly a piano, there's three things that are important: the design, the materials, and the method or the workmanship by which those materials are put into that design. With all three, Steinway, Boston, Essex, they're all designed by Steinway. The materials in Steinway, best bar none, it is the finest that there is available. With Boston and Essex, anything that impacts the musicality of the instrument is the best, but other things like legs and casters and things that are not musically impacted, those are what we call engineered materials. The method by which we build the piano, it takes us about a year to build a Steinway piano. And the reason it does is because we're bending wood in all these bizarre shapes, the shape of the rim and the arm and all that. And we don't work on it constantly for a year, but we set it aside. We let it dwell, as we call it. And then it becomes comfortable with its shape. With a mass manufactured piano such as Boston and Essex, they're built much more rapidly. And as a result, the piano goes in and then comes out within a couple of months as opposed to a year. So that makes it a less expensive manufacturing process because it's not just hanging around. And it also allows us to deliver a high quality Steinway product for far less, about half the cost of a Steinway piano. And what's great about the Boston and the Essex pianos is they come with the Steinway promise. And that means for 10 years, you purchase a Boston or an Essex, and in 10 years, you trade that piano in on a new Steinway grand piano, and you will receive everything that you paid for that particular piano. That's quite a guarantee.
In your view, Mr. Losby, what does the future look like for classical music?
I think it's very bright. I mean, I hear some of the naysayers and people saying, well, it's become sort of passé. It's, it's not like Beyonce or whatever it might be. But classical music, particularly in this time right now that we're in this world with this terrible pandemic that we have, it provides something that really I don't think many other musical genres can provide. It provides you with consolation, with inspiration, with hope. And there's always going to be a smaller but well-heeled, curated audience that appreciates this great body of human endeavor that is classical music that touches us in such a profound way. I mean, I love this one quote by Victor Hugo, where he says, "Music expresses that which cannot be spoken, but upon which you cannot remain silent." Classical music fits that definition so well. I'm not certain if some popular music does. So I think that it's bright. I think that the influence that we have, honestly, coming from Asia, and so many wonderful Chinese musicians and Chinese pianists, I mean, it's actually growing exponentially over there, and that's coming around the world. So I have great hope for classical music going forward, and for the Steinway piano as being a part of that classical scene for decades and centuries to come.
As a corollary question to that, how do you see the future of the music industry in the wake of coronavirus?
Well, things have changed abruptly. And I don't know when we're going to be congregating in large concert halls, but I assume we will at some point, because they will find a vaccine for this, a treatment for it or something. It's just, they don't have it right now, but they will find it. And we'll all be going back to concerts. But one thing this has enabled us to do, I think, as a society, is understand that we can connect to each other without being in front of each other. That's why Spirio is so important. That's why what we're doing right now is important, because we're connecting and we're not together. But
That's
being
right.
able to use the digital landscape and the opportunity that it affords us to connect with teachers, to connect with students, I mean, distance learning, it's absolutely fantastic, the opportunity that we have with Spirio and without Spirio, because you can connect two people together like we are connected right now. And imagine having master classes by the great pianists of the day, or lecture recitals or performances. If you've gone online in the last couple of weeks, I have seen more performances online by great artists and artists I've never heard of than I've seen in my probably the last 10 years. So I do think that this pandemic, while as terrible as it is, there is a little tiny silver lining in it. And that's that's the idea that we're able with music to connect over the internet and really kind of be together when we're apart.
Ron, thank you so much for speaking with me today. Until we meet again online or in real life, on behalf of Steinway Sons, on behalf of Steinway CEO Ron Losby, I'm Ben Finane, and I remain musically yours. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.